Netflix has no shortage of supernatural shows, but Dead Boy Detectives felt different, at least in the beginning. It's a little darker, a little weirder, and directly tied to one of my all-time favorite series, The Sandman. When this dropped, I wasn't really sure what to expect. I hadn't read the comics, so I kind of went in blind. And all I was hoping for was just like a fun supernatural show. And that's exactly what I got. Quirky cases, family found vibes, a unique cast, and even a tease of the Endless themselves. But here's the thing, for all its charm, Dead Boy Detectives did have its problems. Elephant in the room being, of course, Neil Gaiman, having the show come out right before, the rest of his shows got canceled across not one, not two, but 3 different streaming platforms. But more importantly to the show itself, there was an uneven tone, kind of spotty CGI at times, and a cancellation that cut off its potential before it could even grow into something potentially. This review is about talking about what it did really well, but at the same time being honest about where the shortcomings were. And of course, figuring out where it lands in the big landscape that is Netflix's sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and supernatural shows. The premise is simple but effective. Edwin and Charles are 2 ghostly detectives who dodge death's pull into the underworld. Well, it's really the underworld for one and the afterlife for another, by helping others solve supernatural mysteries. They're not really trying to be heroes. They're just boys who don't really want to move on, stuck in the limbo of their own deaths. And that's what this show sets itself apart. It's not some cosmic battle of good or evil, especially like the comparison with the Sandman itself. It's not like apocalyptic horror like The Haunting of Hill House. It's smaller, it's quirkier, it's a little bit more intimate. These are ghost stories with humor, horror, and heart, kind of layered each pretty evenly. The episodic case-by-case format each episode kept it pretty accessible. Each episode had its mystery, usually involving restless spirits or cursed humans, while the overarching plot kept tying back to Edwin and Charles's attempts to, not be sent back into the afterlife or even go to the afterlife specifically. While the overarching plot had ties back to Edwin and Charles resisting the afterlife authorities. It gave the show structure while letting the characters still grow. The characters themselves are the heart of the Dead Boy Detective. The characters themselves are the heart of the Dead Boy Detectives. Edwin Paine is the posh, intellectual, kind of stuffy know-it-all type, and who also tragically died decades earlier. He's serious, he's a bit more melancholy, but he's very clever, always looking to logical solutions to supernatural problems. Also, being older probably does help in knowing a little thing or two about how to handle these things. Charles Rowland is the exact opposite. He's scrappy, he's fun, he's gritty, he's cheeky, he's modern, and he died a little bit more recently. And he still gets to carry that rebellious teenage angst. Together, their odd couple dynamic is what makes the show tick. If you have serious and annoying and brooding on the other side, and then you have one that actually has some fun and grit to it that combined somehow makes things work a little. But what they're really held on and mutually bound to is the fact that they both can't move on. Crystal is the psychic medium who ends up joining them eventually throughout the season. She bridges the gap between the living and the dead. Her presence gave the show warmth and anchored the ghosts to a world they couldn't even touch anymore, because she was able to do both. And then there's Nico, the bubbly neighbor, who shouldn't have fit into the dark tone overall, but somehow worked. She brought levity and human grounding. She gave audiences an entry point into the strangeness of the team. As a found family, this group clicked, and I'm a big fan of found families. I talk about found families all the time. It's actually what ends up being a reason why I like a show sometimes more than ones that I don't. You wanted to see them bicker and banter and be bound through all these be bound through solving these cases. Even when the show wasn't firing on all cylinders, the chemistry kind of kept things going. Beyond the core team, the supporting characters added a little bit more intrigue. The afterlife bureaucracy that wanted Charles and Edwin back is what gave the show its central tension. There's chase sequences, there's ultimatums, and the constant question, how long can you cheat death? Villains range from grotesque monsters to manipulative humans dabbling in the dark arts. None were groundbreaking by any stretch, but they did fit the episodic format well enough. And, about halfway through, I kind of realized for myself I didn't need to be paying all that much attention to still enjoy the show. It became like a very easy show to have in the background, while also occasionally staring at the screen and then potentially doing something else at the same time too. And then of course, let's get back to the cameos of what I think the characters made really fun for me. For fans of the Sandman like myself and others like me, seeing members of the Endless just teased is just like a fun little snippet to have into it. It connected the show to a much larger mythology, also without overshadowing it. These teases reminded us that this wasn't just some quirky spin-off, it was actually meant to tie into the greater storytelling overall of the Sandman and the universe to which Neil Gaiman was building out onto Netflix, but obviously no longer is. Thematically, Dead Boy Detectives did wrestle with some pretty interesting and surprising heavy ideas under its surface. At its core, it's a show about resisting fate. Edwin and Charles are literally running away from the afterlife. They are refusing to cross over. They were refusing to begin the next stage, or rather the end of their human lives. That's what makes every case they solve symbolic. They're helping others find peace while being unable to find peace on their own. It's also a story about chosen family. Again, one of my favorite tropes. These characters don't belong anywhere. Edwin and Charles are dead. Crystal is haunted by her psychic gift. And Nico is just trying to find acceptance. Together they build a fun family of misfits, proving that belonging doesn't have to do with family or blood. And then there's this idea of unfinished business. Every ghost they meet represents a life that was cut short, or a story left hanging. Solving these mysteries isn't just entertainment, it's also an exploration of grief, of regret, and of closure. As much as I enjoyed the show, I have to be honest, Dead Boy Detectives was not as good as it could have been. The CGI was often rough, distracting from what should have been terrifying monsters or haunting situations. Instead of feeling scary, some of its effects came off as cheap. The tone also swung widely. Sometimes it leaned into horror, and then sometimes it leaned into too much of a campy teen angst sort of situations. Sometimes there was some heartfelt drama, and then of course there were many comedic moments. Balancing these tones didn't really come across all that organized and well to me, at least consistently throughout the season. Again, I mentioned this already, but the episodic mysteries weren't necessarily groundbreaking. They were just kind of solving things to solve things. If you wanted something that had a little bit more depth or some like almost Sherlock Holmes-esque level of mystery, you're not going to get it. And if you wanted something that had the grandness of the Sandman, you also weren't going to get it. And of course the show wasn't trying to do all of those things, but at the same time, the things they were trying to do, they didn't do it well consistently. And it's all fine, but that's why for me, it never really broke out of that casual watch category. Then came the cancellation despite its reception. Again, we've mentioned before that Neil Gaiman was a major factor into that contribution of cancellation. It's also the fact that, perhaps the show didn't do as well. And, I'm sure Netflix has plenty of metrics to prove that perhaps it just didn't. For me, what sucks the most about it is, of course, the cameos of the Endless that had like hints of other different plot threads that are never going to get to be explored. And although the show wasn't perfect, it had tons of room to grow into something much more interesting, much more bold. And while the show wasn't perfect, it had room to grow into something better. Bigger even, potentially. Would I watch season 2? Yes. But without a Dead Boy Detectives feels like a one-and-done experiment. So where does this land for me? Dead Boy Detectives is background viewing to me. I've mentioned it before. I'm mentioning it again. It does not need to be watched with such intensity that you need to know every single thing that is happening. It's enjoyable. It has enough mystery to keep you engaged. So where does it land? For me, Dead Boy Detectives is background viewing. It's enjoyable, it's charming in places, and it has enough mystery to keep you engaged. But it's not must-watch material. If you're a Sandman fan, check it out for the connections and the little plot threads here and there. If you're in the mood for supernatural mystery with found family energy, but if you skip it, you're not missing much. It's a fun side story. It's not the cornerstone of Netflix fantasy. This is Sage and Sorcery, and Dead Boy Detectives is a quirky supernatural detour. Worth watching casually, but it is not essential. It's fun and flawed, and now it's cut short. In the end, it's another reminder that Netflix's fantasy lineup can be magical one moment and frustratingly fragile the next.